Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon, and I am your host. And I just wanted to make sure that my microphone is working. I'm still playing with my audio setup here and my video setup here, but this episode of Pod Save Chocolate is dedicated to the idea of Mario Kart economics. And we're going to go take a look at what Mario Kart economics are, how they might apply in the chocolate value chain, and much, much more. Before we get into today's episode, a reminder, no matter where you're checking in from today, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the live chat in YouTube, the comments on LinkedIn and Facebook, and let me know where in the world you are connecting from. Or if you'd like to make a comment or if you have a question about anything that I'm going to be talking about today, you can throw those into the comments and I will get them asked and answered. So this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, is in fact sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. I'm going to get rid of this so it's a little easier to see. This is the homepage of The Chocolate Life right now. You can go there and you can click on any of the stories, but you can become a member. There's a green button up here. Mine says account because I'm logged in. You can go in, it'll say join. You can become a free member or become a premium member of The Chocolate Life. This episode is sponsored by you. Your support, both as a free member or as a premium member, is what makes The Chocolate Life happen, as well as these episodes of Pod Save Chocolate. And for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate, I put together a post. And here is the post for today's episode. And before I get there, I have a little confession to make. I have literally never played Mario Kart. Now, my daughter loves Mario Kart, and I have visited her, and she and her boyfriend and friends play Mario Kart in front of me, and I watch what it is that's going on, which is the whole generation of Mario Kart. I mean, I remember the last console game that I might have played might have been Asteroids or something like that, which I know dates me considerably. But one of the reasons why I want to bring up this idea of Mario Kart economics, and this is a hypothesis that I have, is that rather than appealing abstractly to the notion of here are some people you don't know in countries you're likely never going to visit, being engaged in a project that you're likely to never participate in, that perhaps one way that we can engage with you is around something you do like to do, which is Mario Kart. And if we can take analogies out of Mario Kart and connect them to what it is that we're trying to do in the cocoa to chocolate value chain, then maybe we can form a connection that there's a value in doing so. And that's part of the hypothesis that I am working from as I put together this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. So this is the post for the episode for today, and it basically serves as a run of show. So it's the order in which I'm going to present things. I don't script things, so this is the order I'm going to talk about things, and there are going to be links and other things that you can refer to. So this is sort of a detail-heavy kind of idea, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was that prompted me to do this exploration into Mario Kart economics, because, as I say, I don't have a whole lot of experience with Mario Kart itself. But what the basic idea of Mario Kart economics is that the game interferes during the process of the races. That if you are a front runner, then the game throws things into your path that are going to slow you down. And if you're at the back of the pack, the game is going to give you power-ups or boosts or things which are going to level the playing field between the front runners who may be advantaged for one reason or another, right? And the people who are at the back of the pack. Now, within the Mario Kart game universe, I have learned you get to choose a driver, you get to choose a car, you get to choose tires, you get to choose what's called the glider. You have all of these variables from which you can choose. And then depending upon the way you choose them, you have certain advantages or disadvantages during the games. For example, you might have a very fast car in terms of top speed, but it might be slow to accelerate. Or you might have something which is very, very fast to accelerate, but for example, doesn't have much of a top speed, and depending upon the skill of the driver. Why is that important? Because if you hit something, right, you slow down, but you want to quickly accelerate. You need more acceleration to dodge things that are in your path. So selecting the driver, right, and the car and these variables determine to some extent the outcome of the game. And we can make analogies between those advantages or those variables and the various actors involved in the cocoa to chocolate value chain. So in general, the people with economic power and political power, right, organize the game so that they are at the front of the pack, right? And the people without much economic power, without much political power, i.e. farmers, find themselves at the back of the pack. And what we've done in many societies, this is a large part of politics and things like the New Deal of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and a lot of other kinds of social policies, that what we're going to do is we're going to give people who are disadvantaged, people who are normally at the back of the pack, we're going to give them power-ups and boosts, which enable them, well, which try to level the playing field to some extent. And that's the idea. Sometimes this is called rubber banding within the Mario Kart game universe. It was not, the invention is not attributable to any particular person at the Mario Kart development team at Nintendo. It's something that grew out of a group process and has evolved over years. But that's the basic idea. And we find these ideas in various forms as a part of many, many game universes. So in universe, loot kits and various other items that you can purchase and play for and buy up and level up during the course of the game. And Mario Kart is perhaps one of the best known versions of that. So in general, we're going to take a look at this. Mario Kart Economics refers to in-game balancing system, often called rubber banding, where players who fall behind receive better power-ups, helping them catch up and keeping races competitive. And within a video game universe, this makes an enormous amount of sense. If you're at the back and there is no chance to catch up, right, or at the front, and you know that nobody behind you is going to be able to catch up, it affects satisfaction with the gameplay. And so these various obstacles and power-ups level the playing field among the players. So, right. So we have, as I mentioned, we have concepts which are similar to Mario Kart Economics and rubber banding in the economic, social policy, the political sphere. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out social policies, economic policies, political policies, which are going to affect the way assets and resources are going to be redistributed. There may be a randomness aspect of it, or that may be very, very closely directed in terms of when it happens. So within the Mario Kart universe, when you get something is not necessarily random, right? So if you get a power up or if you get a block of blue shell, it is really, really dependent upon the way the game is currently being played. So who are the actors? You know, what is the disparity between the front runners and the people in the back of the pack? There is not a randomness aspect in Mario Kart Economics. And the question is, should there be randomness in terms of other kinds of systems? So we're going to talk about all that other kind of stuff, right? Again, I've never played Mario Kart, and my hypothesis is that it might be a way to engage with people who've really never thought about cocoa farming or really never thought about the disadvantage that cocoa farmers face, right, in trying to get a leg up in the world. But by explaining things in terms of Mario Kart game mechanics, there might be a way to engage with them at a level um, that enables them to connect and understand what the challenges are in a more concrete way, and a less abstract way. So one of the things that I asked, and did a little work around is it possible to imagine, to think about COCOBOD, which is the Ghanaian government cocoa board, in terms of Mario Kart economic concepts through the lens of MKE, as I say. So Ghana's COCOBOD is a rubber band, right? But it twists basically in one direction. So while Ghana is formally democratic, and my attention is going to be over on my screen here, its cocoa economy functions like an autocratic enclave. What does that mean? Is that COCOBOD is a monopsony, and that means it is the only entity which is legally given the power to set prices and to purchase and to sell. So if you want to buy and sell cocoa within Ghana, you need to have a license from the government cocoa board, right? If you're a farmer, you can only sell to the government cocoa board, or through the government cocoa board. Everything is controlled by COCOBOD. So if I am an individual smallholder farmer, or I'm a cooperative, I cannot legally shop around for better prices. So the prices are fixed by the state. COCOBOD sets the prices, and that behaves like a throttle, again, in race car economic terms. So when the market price exploded in 2023 and 24, the COCOBOD raised farm gate prices slowly and modestly, right? And with a great deal of delay, keeping growers well behind the leaders. So what happened is that there was this disparity, and the people who were the front of the pack were capturing most of the value associated with the increase in prices, because the government had set a throttle, had set a point and said, here is the price that we're going to pay. This is what we're going to pay, and it's not reflective of what the market price is. It's what the board sets. And so the bulk of the windfall in Ghana, especially Cote d'Ivoire, in very large extent, well, because it is also a controlled economy, although perhaps not as tightly controlled as the Ghanaian economy, right? But there's something slightly different here, is that, in a game of Mario Kart, the game is not also a racer. So there is no agent of the game which is sitting in a car, which it has, I'm going to pick the best driver, I'm going to pick the best car, I'm going to go optimize what it is that I'm doing, right? And in order to be able to make sure that I have the best chance of winning. There's no way people would play a game in which a driving game like that, in which the game was going to win all the time, right? But what happens is that in this particular case, COCOBOD is getting into the game. It's becoming a racer. There are plans to own a couple 100,000 hectares of cocoa producing lands, making the regulator a racer, a competitor in the game. So that effectively lets the front runner, right, set the item box distribution for everybody else, avoiding encountering blue shells for themselves. And so this is a way to think about COCOBOD, right, in the context of Mario Kart economics. So the TLDR of this is the COCOBOD's version of rubber banding runs upwards. The state absorbs a surplus, channels its urban budgets or debt service, and offers farmers only small consolation boosts. Fertilizer, I realize it's just a UK spelling. I'm not entirely sure why that's the case. I wasn't paying attention. Fertilizer subsidies, price stabilization rhetoric. The lagging smallholder farmers receive neither real bargaining power nor the blue shell leverage. A blue shell, boom, that the front runners run into, it slows them down. They might have a wreck, take a while to get back into the race. The rules keep them permanently in the back third of the pack. A robust democracy behaves like Mario Kart with balanced rubber banding. Just enough level ups to keep the race competitive, but not so much in many that skill and innovation cease to matter, right? Autocratic structures like state-dominated cocoa boards, invert, disable, or cripple open market mechanics. locking in the lead and converting power-ups into tools for regime maintenance rather than social mobility. And this is, an interesting way to think about Mario Kart economics in relation to a highly controlled government monopoly or monopsony in the case of Ghana when it comes to the cocoa sector, right? That it's easy to think about how to apply Mario Kart game mechanics to a larger ecosystem of something like cocoa farming, price subsidies, and things like that. So what we can do is there's a table here where we think about some Mario Kart game mechanics, what we might think of in a democratic system that is the comparison, and what we find is in something like a COCOBOD style sector. So what are blue shells, right? What are item boxes, speed adjustment, and track layout and rule transparency. And what you do is you find out that if there is a way to really, really carefully or closely identify aspects of the way a controlled economy works that benefit the leaders. So the government itself, big cocoa traders, and big chocolate makers, right? The rules are bent so that what we're doing is we're throwing uh, crumbs, for want of a better item. So the boosts that are given to the farmers are relatively trivial and don't really benefit them to the same extent that they do the leaders in the game. Right? The same thing can be thought of when it comes to fair trade. So there is a similar kind of set of analogies which can be drawn when we think about the concept of quote unquote fair trade. Right? So when there is a mismatch demand between, or there's a mismatch between supply and demand for quote unquote ethical cocoa, right? It turns out that a retail brand can only badge or identify, put a logo on a small fraction of the products and label them as fair trade or living income differential, something often referred to as, or a term that is often related to living income differential is the living income reference price, right? So once what they can label as fair trade is certified, extra beans that are certified revert to conventional channels. So what does that mean? When a group of farmers, a cooperative, an individual farmer is never fair trade certified, they can't afford it. But when a group of farmers, a cooperative, is certified, the fees that they pay, so the initial certification fee and the recertification audit fees that they pay, apply to all of the product that they produce. So, if they pay fees for, 300 farmers and 300 farms, and that means that they have, let's just say 10,000 tons. That's not what that means, right? Right. But if they're only able to sell 5,000 tons of the cocoa, half of the cocoa, as fair trade certified, what they've done is they've paid the fees on the other half of their production, right? But they're not going to be able to recoup the fees because they can't recoup the premium. They aren't paid the premium for what is not purchased as certified, and they end up the amount they receive in premiums, the total amount they receive, then get discounted. Right? They don't get the full value of what they've paid for when they decided to become certified and to do all the work of being certified. They're only paid for that portion of the crop which they can sell as certified. And one of my particular issues with fair trade is that the fair trade organizations don't guarantee to purchase all of the crop that is produced at fair trade prices. So they are leaving essentially the majority, if not 100% of the market risk in the hands of the groups that are being certified, which I think is a form of economic imperialism, right? So again, when we talk about pricing structures, where there's one buyer, like COCOBOD, right, that sets the farm price, any upstream cost or any upstream risk can get passed down the system, right? We said we'd pay this, but we're going to deduct this, right, because costs were different. And generally, the farmer or the cooperative, right, has the least leverage in the situation, and they will take what it is that they're offered, what they are given. But if they're upstream costs, they can easily be deducted or withheld from the premium payments for one reason or another. And this is another aspect of fair trade, quote unquote fair trade, which is a challenge. There's an enormous requirement for bookkeeping up the value chain, but there's not a concomitant commitment to concomitant. There's not a concomitant demand or requirement for bookkeeping and reporting down the value chain back down the farmer. So if we said we were going to pay $10,000 and we were going to give, did actually $10,000, was it given to the people we thought it was going to be given to, right? And were they able to take advantage of the premium as we promised? And that's really, really hard to track given the way the system is run, which I think is a problem, right? So the program costs rise with inflation. So what they could be: audit fees, bank charges, cooperative staff, fertilizer, transport costs. If they get rise, if the premium stays the same, right, then the farmer is the one who loses out. All those upstream costs get absorbed and can be passed on to the buyers. What it says is the premium, the value of the premium that the farmer receives shrinks. So, and then if I'm a big company, and if I'm a multinational, there are always ways to circumvent the rules. I can change my formulations. There are lots of things that can be done. All of these disadvantage the farmer, right? And there aren't any really blue shells, obstacles that these big companies, right, get presented. Now, we could argue that the EUDR taken as a whole is a blue shell for everybody, right? Did it equally affect everybody? No. Big companies that have more resources, governments that have more resources, are affected differently from individual farmers who have far fewer resources, far less that they can call on in order to be able to, who's going to pay for doing the GPS mapping of the boundary of my farm? Do I have to cover those costs? Is the cooperative covering those costs? How are they deducting them from the money that they owe me? Is the government covering? There's lots of ways that the blue shells, even if it is the same blue shell, affects people differently depending upon where in the economy, where in the value chain they exist, right? And so blue shells all by themselves turn out to be really, really controversial in game mechanics, right? And what can we learn from the controversy when applying these principles? So for people for big companies, for multinationals, it says for the leaders, right? It can feel unfair to the leaders and skilled players who have built a strong lead only to lose it due to an item they can't easily defend against. So this is, straight into the Mario Kart game economics. And we could say, well, what is the equivalent, right, which might be seen socially, politically, economically, and legislation? And we saw that recently. I did a post. I'll put the link to it in this episode after we get done, where I discussed the EUDR. And one of the objections that some of the agricultural ministers in the European Union said is, why are we being penalized? We're not doing the deforestation here in Europe, right? The deforestation is happening in all these foreign countries that are in the around the equator, in the equatorial zone, right? But why are we having to bear the burden of all the bookkeeping and bear the cost of all the bookkeeping when we're not the ones who are deforestation isn't happening in our country? So this blue shell is disproportionately affecting us, right? Failing to understand that they were the ones who set the system up in the first place, right? And 2 years later, they're just not really understanding what it was that they asked for. So there was unintended consequences. They were unaware, they didn't think it through, right? They are unprepared for the onslaught of data, which is going to come their way when the EUDR comes into effect. And they're saying, whoa, right? This blue shell, which we created, right, disproportionately affects us. And so we want to make sure that the the blue shell is actually not going to affect us. We want to delay it, put it in the future. We want to exempt ourselves from the regulations. We just want to tell the game, right? You would normally throw in a blue shell at this point, and don't do that. Right? So that's one of the reasons why blue shells are controversial. The the person, the group, the player, the entity that is affected by the blue shell may say this is unfair, right? Even if they're the ones who created the blue shell in the first place, which is the profound irony of the EUDR. But for others, right? So if the farmer, right, and this is not the EUDR specifically, but we've got something like fair trade and things like that. Um, the notion that I am always going to receive a price of at least X, that no matter what the world market price does, there is a floor, right? That in addition to there being the floor, there's going to be a premium that is paid, right? That gives a sense of hope. It gives a sense of excitement, a sense of possibility for the people who are not front runners, for people who are back in the pack. But the real question becomes, you know, you know, you know, you know, does it work? Is it going to make it happen? And the answer to the question is even with the rubber banding that goes on with fair trade, it is still not equally applied, right? So, for example, not all of the cocoa, limiting the discussion to cocoa farming, not all the cocoa that is grown on fair trade terms is sold on fair trade terms. And so the premiums that are paid only cover a portion of the costs. And the risk, therefore, is still in the hands of the farmers. It's not in the hands. The Fair Trade Labeling Organization, they get paid, right, no matter what, right? So they're just a licensing company, right? They get paid for whatever they're doing. They're not taking the market risk. They have governments, NGOs, other people are donating money to them so that they can continue. It's ironic that they're not sustainable as a business on their own. They can't live on the fees that they collect. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And so I suppose the question for people who have been here for a while is, what do you think? Does the idea of approaching a generation of chocolate fans around this idea of Mario Kart economics, does it make sense to try to connect to people that way? That you may not have thought about, what the mechanics of a government, a system like COCOBOT, or you might not have thought about a system like fair trade, right? How does it actually affect the mechanics of the market, right? We don't have there is no such thing as an open market in a controlled economy like that in Ghana. The regulatory board, COCOBOD, right, is the one who sets the prices, and they react slowly or quickly. If there is a disparity between what's going on in the market and what it is they're paying at the farm gate, then the people who are at the head of the pack are going to disproportionately profit from the COCOBOD being slow. So, might there be a way in terms of game mechanics to set the triggers very, very differently? That the trigger for the farm gate price is not based on the COCOBOD meeting and deciding something. There's some other trigger that goes on. So we can use this notion of Mario Kart game economics to actually game through. We can simulate things, right, in order to figure out what is sort of a more optimum strategy, which might benefit people who are in the back of the pack, but not disproportionately benefit people who are at the front of the pack. It needs to be balanced, which is the point, right? And because farmers tend to have less leverage in the system, maybe they did well. They might not have chosen to be farmers. It might have been what it was that it was available to them as a career, right? So, what does that mean for them? Can they go and actually How do they take advantage of the system? It needs active intervention. It needs people who are committed to redistribution up and redistribution down. Most people are interested in wealth. For people who claim that they're not interested in redistribution, they're against redistribution, they're actually like for redistribution of wealth as long as the redistribution of wealth is in their direction. Right? They're not interested in redistributing wealth back down the value chain. In the end, if you don't have healthy farms, if you don't have healthy farmers, I mean, it's fundamental to the notion of sustainability. You need to have environmental sustainability. You need to manage the farms. You need to manage all of the resources, right, in a way that the farms will be healthy and thriving 100 years from now. From an economic sustainability perspective, you need to make sure that there's enough money in the system to be able to achieve the environmental sustainability objectives. So farmers need to receive enough money, or the systems around the farmers need to ensure that there's enough money so that if there are environmental goals, right, the money is there to implement the environmental goals. And this is where, you know, power-ups and boosts and things like that, right, are designed to ensure that the resources are there so that the farmers can implement the environmental goals that we have. I mean, if we recognize that deforestation is bad, we recognize that deforestation will contribute to climate change. If, you know, there are all these interconnected variables that need to be considered. But in the end, it all gets down to the fact that if we want to fix them, somebody's going to have to provide the resources for them. Who's providing the resources for them? It's the people who buy the chocolate, right? If we really want to effectuate change at the level of the farm, what we want to do is we need to make sure that people are signaling with their wallets, right? That this is a value to us, right? This is what we think of as quality. We want to make sure that we're paying enough money, right? And that money actually gets distributed to the farmers, actually makes it all the way down to the farmer, right? So, and the organizations, so it might be the Cocoa Research Institute or some other agricultural ministry which is associated with delivering services. It may be an NGO which is supporting these kinds of things. It could be committed for-profit partners which are committed to developing the services, but we need, or delivering these services, we need to make sure that the resources are there. And it's buying chocolate is what provides the money to effectuate these changes on the farms. So sustainability is about the environment. Sustainability is about economics associated with being able to implement the environmental change. We've also got this idea that farmers live in communities, right? And we need the communities to be healthy and thriving. It's not just the individual farmer, right? It is the community that the farmer lives in. We need to make sure that there's, I mean, we, right, want to, up here in the consuming countries, want to make sure that there's access to education. We want to make sure that, you know, things like water security, income security, all of these things, food security, are ones that are within reach of the cocoa farmer, that they can take advantage of. And in order to do that, we need sustainable markets. We need markets outside the country. So the first three aspects of it, environmental, economic, and social sustainability, are in the producing countries, and markets are generally outside the country. If you don't have people who are willing to pay what it takes to deliver on the environmental, economic, and social sustainability aspects, then it doesn't really matter, right? Nothing is going to happen, right? And boosts and power-ups and blue shells and things like that are designed to hopefully provide a balance, right? When you have a monopsony, that balance is completely lost, right? Which is the point to be made there. So, so I've got some questions which have nothing to do with actually what it is that I'm doing now. So Bartolome Jacobowski. So you've asked the question, so how do I do something like this on LinkedIn? So I use a bit of software from a company called StreamYard. And StreamYard provides the production studio in the cloud. So it's a video switch, which is in the cloud. I have my camera. If I have guests, multiple cameras. It goes into the cloud. It does all the switching. And then what it does is it has a connection to LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, right? And that's how that happens. That's how I do it. Um, I believe that if you wanted to just do it at LinkedIn, you could do it directly at LinkedIn. I've never done it, so I don't know how that happens. I've always used StreamYard to go and do that. So you just go StreamYard.com. They'll be able to figure it out for you. So I'm interested in sort of knowing, Bart, interesting topic in what respects. I could actually, so MediCert Lab, so I'm going to guess that you do laboratory analyses. These are going, you might, MediCert says it might be medical focused, but you might also be doing certificate analyses and phytosanitary analyses and other kinds of similar kinds of lab tests that for example, if I am a company and I want to export a product, so out of, for example, Ecuador into the United States, I know that depending on the product, I need to have a phytosanitary certification. I probably want to have a certificate of analysis or one form or another, and it may be that your lab does those things. So it turns out that when we look at these, Mario Kart game mechanics, there are ways to factor in how maybe the way that a country writes the legislation around the kinds of tests that are required and who can do them and how they're done actually affects the game. So it may actually, all right, not be a blue shell for the front runners, right? It is going to be something that the people who are in the back of the pack. I know from my own work trying to import products from Ecuador and Peru that finding a smallholder who has got this really interesting product who needs to get certificates of analysis in order to get the product, in order to get an export certificate, an export license, can be insanely challenging. And so maybe one of the things that we could do, right, in terms of, again, game mechanics, might be to find a way to fast track those kinds of analyses, make them less expensive, to be able to encourage certain kinds of innovation by making it easier for small players to export product, right, directly to consuming countries. Anyway, and so you're in Poland. Thank you for sharing that. So if you've been a regular visitor to The Chocolate Life or to episodes of Pod Safe Chocolate, the notion of quality, Bartolome, I'm hoping I pronounced that properly. The notion of quality is one that has come up on a number of different occasions, right? There is no objective measure of quality in cocoa and chocolate, right? Quality is a basket of attributes, right? And you and I might have the same attributes in our basket. We might have different attributes, but we might also, even if we have the same attributes, we might weigh those attributes or weight those attributes differently. So for you, a primary, well, not for you, but for some people, a big company, price may be the primary attribute. I need to make sure that I can buy my product at this price so that I can be profitable. So I'm looking at price and other measures of quality, all right, that other buyers in the market might think of are really important, because will become less important for you. So for example, if I'm a craft chocolate maker making specialty chocolate, then I'm looking for small lots of beans, interesting fermentations, just new places that the beans come from, interesting genetics, all these sorts of things. These are attributes that I'm going to weigh heavily. Are they ethically produced? Are they sustainably produced? Can I have a direct relationship with a farmer? These are attributes of quality, right, which are in my basket, and I'm going to weigh them more, and I'm willing to pay more for them, right? For a big chocolate company, it may be that price is a primary attribute, but it may also be is that consistency is a primary attribute. I want to know that if I purchase beans next year, the beans are going to be the same as the ones I'm buying today. And the beans that I buy today are the same as the ones that I bought last year. So we do have very, very different ideas of what quality is. And the way we signal what quality is by what we're willing to pay for, right? If I'm in the grocery store, well, like I'm here in the United States, I'm in a Walmart, I'm in an Aldi's, or I'm in some sort of discount kind of place, a big box store like Costco, I'm signaling that price is really, really important to me. And it may be a primary thing that I'm looking for. I'm maybe looking for quantity, right? And that value is what it is that factors into um, my notion of what quality is, right? So I spend a lot of time in the r/chocolate subreddit, and there's a lot of how come chocolate costs so much, or what do you think about this brand versus that brand? There's this notion about quality which needs to be discussed, but in the context that we've been talking about it for quite some time, is the measure of quality is what you're willing to pay for, and what you're willing to pay for is an indicator of what you value, right? There is no objective. So 70% isn't objectively better than 68%. And 90% is not objectively better than 80% just because it's cacao content. Just because the beans come from this place doesn't mean it's objectively better, right? From a quality perspective than the beans that come from some other place in the same country, right? There are all these really, really complex factors that go into that discussion. So you are testing PAH in cocoa. So PAH, I don't know what that acronym is. PAH. I know what pH is in terms of acidity, but I don't know what PAH is. And so if you could let me know, Bartolome, I'd be interested in knowing what you're testing there. So getting back to the notion of Mario Kart economics, and I'm going to wrap it up here really, really quickly. And I'll put some more resources that I've been working on into the body of the post for this week later today. It's an interesting lens, right? So there is this branch of mathematics, and which is used in part to think about this. It's around a guy by the name of Pareto, and there are uh, two different conjectures is the wrong word. So there's the weak Pareto principle, and which basically says that, right, anything which benefits a large group of people and is at the disadvantage of no one should be done. Right? And then there's the strong Pareto principle, which says things are they're benefit one player. So according to the weak Pareto principle, and this is the branch of mathematics that can be used to run through optimal solutions to find out what the best, objectively the best combination of driver, cart, glider, and tires to use to select if you want to play Mario Kart and win. Is then so there's all this stuff thinking about game mechanics, right? But applying these to political systems, and without unfairly advantaging one group of people over another, is the real challenge here. So is fair trade in principle a good idea? In principle, it's not a bad idea, right? It's just a question of how is the rubber banding applied? Is it going to advantage people who are at the front of the pack more than it's going to advantage people in the back of the pack, right? And how do you make sure that the people who think that they deserve more or that they're owed more, right, aren't going to deliberately trying to undermine the systems that are put in place in order to be able to advantage the people, or to give the people who are at the back of the pack a leg up and help them move up. It's a really challenging bit of social theory to take a look at. But I wonder, rather than abstracting it out, right, into things like the Pareto principle and this and that other kind of stuff, whether or not to go, you've played Mario Kart before, right? You've played Mario Kart, you know what Mario Kart is all about, and you know what the item boxes are and the power-ups and the boost, and you got a banana or you got a blue shell, you know what all these things are about, right? Let's think about how products get from the farm to your table, right? And if you want to create a more equally rewarding system, right? Where where some of the upstream value, right, is captured and then redistributed back downstream, right? And in the research that I was doing and the questions that I was asking, it pointed out specifically that one thing that Askinosie chocolate does is, in addition to taking a look at what the fair trade price is, what they do is they have a 10% uh, of the value of retail sales, right, which can be associated with the cocoa that comes from a particular cooperative. So what they do is they write a check and they give that back to the cooperative. So the cooperative is participating in the upstream value add for the maker. Really, really good idea. There is a division of Poratos called Belcolod, and they have this group has a program they call Cacao Trace. And one of the elements of Cacao Trace is there's a 10 euro cents per kilo. So for every kilo of finished chocolate that is sold, right, for cocoa that is purchased through the Cacao Trace program, that 10 euro cents is given back to, I don't know if it goes directly to the farmer or it goes to the farmer cooperative, right? But what it is, oh yeah, here's a way to redistribute some of the upstream value, right, when we do have a connected supply chain. And that's really important. Traceability isn't always just about transferring information up the supply chain. We also want to be able to trace the movement of money back down the supply chain. So it's for me, right, is wondering about Mario Kart again. And this is the larger question I have for everyone who's going to watch this today or might be watching this in the future, is whether Mario Kart uh, is actually a good metaphor for talking with people who might not otherwise be engaged, right? Because the conversations are too abstract. But can we give them a model, a metaphor that they're very familiar with, right? And because they are very, very familiar with this model, it enables them to connect with the problems that are faced on the ground. So let me know. Let me know what it is you think about that. So just Bartolome, you have to go. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you enjoy what you're doing. So down here, they're testing PAH, which are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which might be carcinogenic. Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much for clearing that up. I appreciate that. And is it an issue? The answer is if PAHs are developed through cooking or heating, then the question is, are we developing these potentially carcinogenic compounds in the process of, for example, roasting cocoa, right? That might be an interesting question to ask, right? And that's it. I'm done for today for this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. There is a post for this episode. There's a post for every episode of Pod Save Chocolate. Here's the one for today. Here's the homepage of The Chocolate Life. And because this episode of Pod Save Chocolate, like every episode, is sponsored by the members of The Chocolate Life. You can go click on the green button here. I'm logged in, so it says account. And this is my new avatar. I wanted to be sort of a 1920s style tropical adventurer using a photograph that was taken of me. So this is from a selfie. Used a variety of tools in order to make it look this way. But go to the green button, sign up for an account. There's always a free membership. And if you have the resources to support the work that I do, there are premium membership tiers on a monthly and an annual basis that include early access to newsletter, consulting, and other kinds of things that I do for my members. And with that, I want to say thank you very, very much to everyone for being with me today. I don't have a topic for this coming Friday's episode yet. I'll figure it out. But one of the things which I'm really excited about is I've been asked to judge a competition, a new competition. I just received the judging form this morning. I've received most of the entries in the earlier this week, late last week. I've got like 28 chocolate products ranging from cacao vinegar to all sorts of interesting things. I'm really looking forward to being a judge for this. The final awards are being given at the Salon de Chocolat in Paris at the end of October and early November, and so maybe I'll be in Paris for that. I haven't been there since 2018. I'd really love to go back. I've been to France in 2020, but I haven't been to the Salon in Paris since 2018. And with that, I want to say thank you very much to everybody, and remind you that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, maybe you're doing it wrong. Ciao until the next time, everyone.